What's up everyone? Stack Lessons back with another batch. Today we're working through 20 questions on IAM hardening and security controls, threat detection services, and compliance documentation. Each one gets read aloud, then a 10-second countdown before the answer drops. Take your time. Let's get into it. Next up, question 1. Check the condition before the service. Conteso Healthcare needs to connect its on-premises electronic health record system to AWS. Regulatory requirements mandate that patient data never traverse the public internet. The connection must sustain 1 gigabit per second throughput for database replication workloads. Which connectivity option satisfies both requirements? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Only Direct Connect completely bypasses the public internet. AWS Direct Connect establishes a dedicated private network connection between the on-premises data center and AWS that completely bypasses the public internet. The 1 gigabit per second dedicated connection tier provides the required throughput and satisfies the regulatory prohibition on public internet traversal. AWS Site-to-Site VPN creates an encrypted tunnel, but routes all traffic over the public internet, directly violating the compliance requirement regardless of the encryption strength applied. AWS Transit Gateway enables connectivity between VPCs and can attach to on-premises networks, but it requires either a VPN attachment or Direct Connect as the underlying transport, and is not a standalone connectivity option for on-premises environments. Amazon VPC peering is designed for VPC to VPC connectivity within AWS, and does not provide a network transport path from on-premises data centers to AWS. Next up, question 2. The scenario tells you the trade-off. Adatum Pharmaceuticals stores regulatory compliance documents in Amazon S3. Documents are accessed frequently during the first 30 days after creation, and then rarely accessed afterward, though long-term access patterns beyond 30 days are unpredictable and vary by document. Documents must be retained for 7 years. The operations team wants to minimize storage costs automatically without building and maintaining S3 lifecycle rules. Which S3 storage class best meets these requirements? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Unpredictable access means only intelligent tearing fits here. S3 intelligent tearing automatically monitors access patterns for each stored object, and moves it between access tiers, frequent access, infrequent access, and archive instant access, with no performance impact, no retrieval fees for tier transitions, and no operational overhead from manually maintained lifecycle rules. Because long-term access patterns are unpredictable after the initial 30-day window, intelligent tearing's automatic per-object optimization is the correct choice, eliminating the guesswork of manually configured lifecycle rules. S3 standard does not reduce costs for infrequently accessed data, and would result in unnecessarily high storage costs across a 7-year retention period. S3 standard IA reduces storage costs for infrequent access, but charges a per GB retrieval fee, and requires manual lifecycle rule configuration to transition objects, adding operational overhead the team explicitly wants to avoid. S3 Glacier Flexible Retrieval is designed for long-term archival with retrieval times ranging from minutes to hours, making it unsuitable for documents that need immediate access during the first 30 days. Now, question 3. Look for the answer that fully satisfies it. Relic Cloud's security team wants to implement continuous threat detection across 2 fronts. First, they need a service that analyzes CloudTrail management events, Amazon VPC flow logs, and DNS query logs to detect compromised credentials, unusual API activity, and potential account-level threats. Second, They need a service that automatically discovers and classifies sensitive personally identifiable information stored across Amazon S3 buckets. Which two AWS services address these requirements? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. 5 security services, 2 specific jobs, match them carefully. Amazon Guard Duty is a managed threat detection service that continuously analyzes CloudTrail management and data events, Amazon VPC flow logs, and Route 53 DNS query logs using machine learning and threat intelligence to detect anomalies such as unusual API call patterns, compromised EC2 instances communicating with known malicious IP addresses, and credential exfiltration attempts. It directly addresses the account-level threat detection requirement. Amazon Macie is a data security service that uses machine learning to automatically discover, classify, and protect sensitive data stored in Amazon S3, including PII such as names, addresses, financial account numbers, and health records. It addresses the S3 data discovery and classification requirement. Amazon Inspector evaluates EC2 instances and container images for software vulnerabilities and unintended network exposure. It does not analyze S3 content or account-level API behavior. AWS Shield Advanced protects against distributed denial of service attacks on network and application layers. AWS Security Hub is a centralized aggregation and visibility layer that consolidates findings from multiple security services, but does not perform independent threat detection or data discovery. This question splits into 2 parts, and each part needs a completely different AWS service. Imagine your boss drops 2 security problems on you at once. First, someone might be using stolen credentials to call weird APIs at 3 a.m. Second, developers might be storing customer social security numbers in random S3 buckets. These need completely different services. Guard Duty watches 3 things: your CloudTrail logs, your VPC traffic, and your DNS queries. It spots that attacker making unusual API calls from a suspicious IP. Macie quietly scans your S3 buckets and finds those social security numbers automatically. Now the traps. Inspector checks EC2 for software bugs, not accounts or S3. Shield blocks DDoS attacks. Security Hub just collects alerts. It doesn't detect anything on its own. 2 problems, 2 services. Now, here's question 4. Northwind SaaS has multiple development teams deploying resources across 3 separate AWS environment accounts. The Cloud Finance team wants to automatically send an email notification to each team lead when the total monthly AWS spend in their account approaches or exceeds a predefined dollar threshold, enabling corrective action before the billing cycle ends. Which AWS service is specifically designed to deliver this threshold-based cost alerting capability? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Only Budgets triggers threshold-based email alerts automatically. AWS Budgets allows organizations to define custom spending thresholds and automatically sends notifications via email or Amazon SNS when actual or forecasted costs exceed defined limits. Budget alerts can be configured for actual spend, forecasted spend, or usage thresholds, for example, alerting at 80% and 100% of a monthly budget, enabling teams to respond before the billing period ends without any manual monitoring. AWS Cost Explorer provides cost visualization, trend analysis, and right-sizing recommendations for reviewing historical and projected spend, but it does not send automated threshold alerts when spending limits are breached. AWS Cost and Usage Report delivers the most granular billing data available by writing detailed line item records to an Amazon S3 bucket for downstream analysis. It does not provide real-time or near real-time alerting tied to spending thresholds. AWS Trusted Advisor identifies cost optimization opportunities such as idle resources and over-provisioned services, providing recommendations for reducing waste rather than automated alerts triggered by monthly budget limits. Let us keep moving. Question 5. Do not rush the wording. A startup is rapidly scaling its production workloads on AWS and needs a support plan that meets the following requirements: 24/7 access to cloud support engineers via phone, web, and chat, a guaranteed response time of less than 30 minutes when a production system is completely down, access to more than 500 AWS Trusted Advisor checks, and AI-powered contextual troubleshooting assistance. The company does not require a dedicated technical account manager. Which AWS support plan meets all of these requirements at the lowest cost? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Every requirement in this list narrows to exactly one plan. Business Support Plus is the minimum plan that satisfies every stated requirement. It provides 24/7 phone, web, and chat access to cloud support engineers, a guaranteed human engagement time of less than 30 minutes for business-critical system down cases, access to more than 500 AWS Trusted Advisor checks, and real-time AI-powered contextual assistance. A dedicated technical account manager is not included in Business Support Plus, which aligns with the stated requirement to exclude that feature, and its monthly cost is significantly lower than enterprise support. Basic support covers only account, billing, and service quota questions and does not provide access to cloud support engineers, phone support, or any technical response SLA. Developer support provides access to cloud support associates during business hours only, and does not include 24/7 phone access or a sub-30-minute critical response time for production workloads. Enterprise support includes all Business Support Plus capabilities and adds a designated technical account manager along with response times of up to 15 minutes for business-critical cases, but it exceeds the stated requirements and carries a significantly higher monthly minimum commitment. Direct Connect bypasses the public internet entirely. VPN does not. Intelligent tiering owns unpredictable access patterns automatically. Budget alerts are proactive thresholds. Cost Explorer is a retrospective review tool. Time for another one. Question 6. Watch the exact wording. A Datum Cores CTO wants a new order processing system that can continue operating with absolutely zero downtime even if an entire availability zone fails. A solutions architect explains that achieving this requires a different and more expensive architectural approach than simply making the system highly available. Which design concept should the architect implement to meet the zero downtime requirement? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Zero downtime is the key word separating fault tolerance from HAR. Fault tolerance describes a system architecture where the workload continues operating without any interruption even when one or more components fail entirely. This is achieved through full redundant capacity running simultaneously at all times, so failures are transparently absorbed without any recovery period or noticeable impact to end users. High availability is designed to minimize downtime rather than eliminate it. A highly available system may briefly become degraded or unavailable during failover before recovering, making it insufficient for a strict zero downtime requirement. Fault-tolerant architectures are significantly more expensive than highly available ones because they require complete redundant systems actively running in parallel rather than passive standbys. Elasticity is the ability to automatically scale resources up or down in response to changing demand levels, which addresses capacity management rather than component failure resilience. Scalability is the general ability to handle increasing workload volumes, and may involve manual capacity adjustments, but does not specifically address continuous operation through component failures. Let's slow down here. Zero downtime and more expensive are doing a lot of work in this question. Imagine a hospital patient monitoring system. It cannot go offline, even for 30 seconds. That's the gap between high availability and fault tolerance. High availability recovers quickly, maybe in seconds, but there is a brief blip. Fault tolerance means no blip at all. The question plants the phrase absolutely zero downtime and tells you this approach is more expensive. Both clues point away from high availability. Fault-tolerant systems run full redundant capacity in parallel. When an availability zone fails, nothing needs to recover. It was already running. That's why zero downtime always means fault tolerance, not high availability. Let us keep moving. Question 7. Coming up. A company is beginning its cloud migration. The cloud program manager needs to ensure team members receive appropriate training, define new cloud-specific roles, and manage the organizational change process. According to the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, which perspective addresses these capabilities? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Training, roles, organizational change, all belong to people. The people perspective within the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework addresses the human side of cloud adoption, including organizational culture, resource management, training and skills development, leadership alignment, and organizational change management. These capabilities ensure teams have the right skills and structures to support cloud transformation. The business perspective focuses on financial viability and business case development, such as portfolio management and benefits realization. The governance perspective addresses risk management, audit, and compliance controls. The operations perspective covers IT service delivery and ongoing operational management of cloud environments. Time for another one. Let's read question 8. Quick check. A growing development team at Northwind Traders currently has 20 IAM users. The team lead needs to grant all junior developers read-only access to Amazon S3 and all senior developers full access to Amazon EC2. Which approach aligns with AWS IAM best practices for managing these permissions efficiently as the team grows? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Groups let you update one policy. All members update instantly. AWS IAM best practices recommend managing permissions through IAM groups rather than assigning policies directly to individual users. Creating groups such as junior developers and senior developers, and attaching the appropriate policies to each group, provides centralized, scalable permission management. When a user changes roles, an administrator simply moves that user to a different group, instead of editing each user's individual policy. This approach is also easier to audit since group membership defines access. Attaching policies directly to individual users scales poorly as the team grows and makes auditing significantly harder when 20 or more users each have their own policy attachments to review. Sharing IAM access keys among multiple users destroys individual accountability since all actions performed with those keys appear as the same identity in CloudTrail audit logs, violating the principle of individual accountability. Granting all developers the administrator access policy violates the principle of least privilege, provides far more access than either role requires, and creates significant security risk from accidental or malicious changes. Ready. Question 9. Map the scenario to the capability. Conteso Financial Security Team is investigating a breach in which unauthorized administrator privileges were granted to an IAM user at 11:47 p.m. last Friday. The team needs to identify the exact AWS credentials used to make the API call, the source IP address of the request, and the specific IAM action that was invoked. Which AWS service is the authoritative source for this forensic information? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Config shows what changed, only CloudTrail shows who changed it. AWS CloudTrail records every API call made against an AWS account, capturing the identity of the caller, IAM user, role, or root account, the timestamp, the source IP address, the specific API action performed, and the parameters included in the request. CloudTrail is the definitive audit log for answering who did what and when in an AWS environment, making it the correct service for investigating unauthorized IAM changes. Amazon Cloud Watch Logs Insights is used for querying and analyzing operational log data from applications, Lambda functions, and system logs. It does not provide the AWS API call audit trail with caller identity details that CloudTrail captures. Amazon Inspector is an automated vulnerability assessment service for EC2 instances and container images. It identifies software vulnerabilities and unintended network exposure, but does not maintain an audit trail of API activity. AWS Config tracks the configuration state of AWS resources over time, which can show that an IAM policy attachment changed. However, Config records the configuration change itself and does not capture the caller identity, source IP, or full API request details the way CloudTrail does. Let's slow down on this one. When a breach happens, CloudTrail is your first call. Imagine your security team gets a call at midnight. Someone just made themselves an admin. Who did it? And from where? That's what AWS CloudTrail was built to answer. Every API call in your account gets logged. Caller identity, source IP, exact action, timestamp, all captured. Think of it like a hotel key card log. Every entry is timestamped and tied to a name. The other answers miss the mark. CloudWatch Logs Insights is for application logs, not API call history. Inspector scans for software vulnerabilities. AWS Config records that a resource changed, but not who changed it. CloudTrail is the only service that captures the full forensic picture. That's why the exam always routes breach investigations here. Let us switch gears. Question 10. One answer is too broad. Fabricam Corp has hired 8 new developers who all need identical read-only access to Amazon S3 and Amazon DynamoDB. The cloud administrator wants to follow AWS IAM best practices and ensure permissions are easy to update when requirements change. Which 2 actions should the administrator take? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option B and option D. Creating the group and adding users, both steps are required. Creating an IAM group with a shared policy and adding individual users to that group is the AWS recommended approach for granting identical permissions to multiple users. Groups allow permissions to be defined once and automatically apply to all members. When access requirements change, updating the group policy propagates the change to all members instantly without touching individual user configurations. Sharing a single IAM user account violates the principle of individual accountability. CloudTrail audit logs cannot distinguish which physical person performed an action, and rotating credentials requires updating all 8 developers simultaneously. Attaching inline policies directly to individual user accounts creates 8 separate policy copies that must each be updated independently whenever access requirements change, increasing administrative overhead and risk of inconsistency. Granting administrator access violates the principle of least privilege by providing far more access than needed for read-only tasks. Fault tolerance means zero downtime through full redundancy, not just reduced downtime like HA. CloudTrail captures caller identity and source IP for every API call. Config only tracks resource configuration state. Let us switch gears. Question 11. Do not stop at the first match. Fabricam Financial Services is deploying a web banking application behind an application load balancer on AWS. Their security team has identified 2 categories of threats they must defend against: SQL injection and cross-site scripting attacks embedded in HTTP request parameters targeting the application layer, and large-scale volumetric DDoS attacks designed to overwhelm network infrastructure. Which two AWS services should they enable to address both threat categories? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. App layer injection and network DDoS each need a dedicated service. AWS WAF is a web application firewall that inspects and filters HTTP and HTTPS traffic at the application layer, blocking malicious request patterns including SQL injection and cross-site scripting attacks before they reach the origin application. It uses configurable rules and AWS managed rule groups to identify and block exploit patterns. AWS Shield provides managed DDoS protection. Shield Standard is automatically included for all AWS customers and defends against volumetric network floods, protocol attacks, and reflection attacks targeting layers 3 and 4. Shield Advanced adds a 24/7 DDoS response team, enhanced detection, and financial protection against scaling charges caused by DDoS events. Amazon Guard Duty is a continuous threat detection service that analyzes CloudTrail events, VPC flow logs, and DNS logs to surface malicious activity and anomalous behavior inside the AWS environment. It does not inspect or block inbound HTTP application traffic in real time. Amazon Inspector performs automated vulnerability assessments against EC2 instances and container images, identifying software vulnerabilities and unintended network exposures in workload configurations, rather than defending against live attack traffic. Amazon Macie uses machine learning to discover, classify, and protect sensitive data stored in Amazon S3, addressing data exposure risk rather than network or application layer attacks. This one pairs two services. Let's make sure you know exactly which threat each one handles. Imagine Fabricom's banking site is under two simultaneous attacks. Hackers are injecting SQL into login forms. A botnet is flooding the network with fake traffic to knock it offline. Two threats, two tools. AWS WAF, a web application firewall, is your bouncer at the door. It reads every incoming HTTP request. It blocks attacks like SQL injection and cross-site scripting before they reach your app. AWS Shield handles distributed denial of service attacks. It absorbs massive traffic floods before they hit your servers. Shield Standard is free for every AWS account, no setup needed. Shield Advanced adds a 24/7 response team. Guard Duty detects threats but doesn't block them. That's the trap. Let us switch gears. We're on question 12. Litware Bank's compliance team needs to provide external auditors with official documentation confirming that AWS maintains controls for HIPAA compliance. The auditors require signed certifications and formal audit reports, not internal configuration summaries. How should Litware Bank obtain this documentation? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Artifact is the self-service download portal for AWS compliance reports. AWS Artifact is the self-service portal where customers can access and download AWS compliance documentation, including audit reports, certifications, and attestations for programs such as HIPAA, PCI DSS, SOC 1 and SOC 2, FedRAMP, and GDPR. AWS Artifact provides the actual signed compliance documents that external auditors require. AWS support cannot issue compliance certificates on demand through service tickets. AWS Config evaluates whether your own AWS resources comply with rules you define. It does not generate AWS's own compliance certifications. The Management Console billing dashboard contains cost and usage information, not AWS compliance documentation. Keep your focus here. Question 13. Wording first. memory second. An engineering team is reviewing their AWS workload against the AWS well-architected framework. They discover that their application runs on a fleet of R5.4x large EC2 instances, with average CPU utilization of 12% and average memory utilization of 18% measured over the past 90 days. According to the sustainability pillar of the well-architected framework, what is the most direct action the team should take to reduce the environmental impact of this workload? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Most direct means fixing on instance waste before changing regions. Right-sizing the EC2 instances to match actual resource consumption is the most direct application of the sustainability pillar's core principle of maximizing utilization and minimizing waste. Running R5.4x large instances at 12% CPU and 18% memory utilization means the vast majority of provisioned hardware resources are idle and consuming energy without delivering value. Selecting smaller instance types aligned to the workload's measured requirements improves hardware efficiency, reduces the physical server footprint required, and directly lowers the environmental impact of the workload immediately. Migrating to a region with higher renewable energy sourcing is a valid sustainability action explicitly listed under the sustainability pillar, but it is a secondary consideration when significant on-instance waste exists. Eliminating idle resource consumption delivers larger efficiency gains regardless of the energy source. Purchasing savings plans reduces the financial cost of the workload, but does not change the physical resources provisioned or the energy consumed. It is a billing optimization, not a sustainability improvement. Enabling enhanced networking improves network I/O throughput, but does not address the primary waste of severely underutilized CPU and memory resources on oversized instances. All right, question 14. Separate context from noise. A cloud architect at Conteso Technology is explaining the AWS shared responsibility model to a development team choosing between running a MySQL database on Amazon EC2 and using Amazon RDS for MySQL. Which statement accurately describes how customer responsibilities differ between these two approaches? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. With RDS, AWS owns OS and database engine patching entirely. The shared responsibility model divides obligations differently based on the service type. When running MySQL on Amazon EC2, the customer has infrastructure as a service responsibilities, installing and patching the guest operating system, installing and patching the MySQL database engine, configuring network and firewall settings, and managing backups. Amazon RDS is a managed database service where AWS assumes responsibility for the database engine patches and version upgrades, the underlying operating system patches, hardware maintenance, automated backups, and high availability replication. The customer's responsibilities in RDS narrow to data management, IAM and network access configuration, and backup retention decisions. AWS never patches the guest operating system on EC2 instances. That boundary is clearly the customer's responsibility regardless of what is installed on the instance. With RDS, customers have no direct access to the underlying instance or operating system at all, so AWS manages those layers entirely. Let's slow down on this one. The shared responsibility split between EC2 and RDS is worth getting right. Imagine you rent an apartment versus buy a house. In a rental, the landlord fixes the pipes. Own the house, the pipes are your problem. Same idea applies here. Say you spin up MySQL on EC2. From day one, you patch MySQL and the operating system. You manage your own backups too. AWS handles only the physical servers. Now switch to Amazon RDS. The Managed Database Service. AWS patches the operating system. AWS patches the database engine. Your job shrinks to managing your data and who gets access. That's the exam trap. AWS owns the physical servers, but everything running on top is your responsibility on EC2. Alright. Question 15. Compare scope and condition. A cloud security team is reviewing IAM configuration across their organization's AWS accounts and compiling a governance checklist. Which two actions align with AWS IAM security best practices? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option E. Root access keys and shared accounts are the obvious wrong answers. Enabling multi-factor authentication for privileged IAM users and the root account is a foundational security practice that significantly reduces the risk of account compromise. Even if a password is stolen or phished, an attacker cannot authenticate without the physical second factor. Assigning IAM roles to EC2 instances eliminates the need for long-term access keys in code, configuration files, or environment variables. The EC2 instance automatically receives temporary, automatically rotated credentials through the instance metadata service, and these credentials expire frequently, limiting exposure if they are ever leaked. Creating access keys for the root account violates a core security requirement. The root account should never have access keys because root credentials cannot be restricted by IAM policies and grant unlimited access to the entire account. Sharing IAM user accounts among multiple team members violates individual accountability because CloudTrail audit logs cannot attribute actions to specific people when they share credentials. Granting broad permissions initially and restricting later is the opposite of the principle of least privilege, which requires granting only the minimum permissions needed to perform a specific job function from the start. WAF defends at the application layer. Shield defends at the network layer. AWS Artifact provides downloadable compliance certifications for external auditors. RDS removes OS and database patching from the customer's responsibility. Alright, let's handle question 16. Tailspin Toys has launched a cloud migration initiative. The Project Management Office has been assigned to oversee the migration program, manage associated risks, conduct cloud spending audits for regulatory compliance, and maintain a centralized registry of all applications being migrated with their current status and priority. According to the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, CAF, which perspective encompasses these responsibilities? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. PMO, Risk Registry, Spending Audit, Governance Perspective owns all this. The governance perspective in the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework encompasses program and project management, risk management, cloud financial management, and application portfolio management. These activities directly align with the Project Management Office's oversight of the migration program, management of risk, auditing of cloud spending, and tracking of application status across the portfolio. The business perspective focuses on aligning cloud investments with business strategy and ensuring measurable value delivery, including stakeholder engagement and product management. The people perspective addresses organizational change management, workforce development, and building cloud fluency. The operations perspective covers day-to-day operational tasks such as incident management, observability, performance monitoring, and change management for running production systems. Here we go. For question 17, the qualifier matters. Tailspin Fintech is concerned about compromised IAM credentials being used to exfiltrate data from Amazon S3. The security team wants continuous, automated threat detection that analyzes CloudTrail events, VPC flow logs, and DNS query logs, without requiring any agents to be installed on EC2 instances. Which service should they enable? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. No agents, behavioral logs only. Guard Duty is the agentless detector. Amazon Guard Duty is a fully managed, agentless threat detection service that uses machine learning to continuously analyze cloud trail management and data events, VPC flow logs, and DNS logs. It surfaces malicious activity such as compromised credentials, unauthorized API calls, cryptocurrency mining, and reconnaissance patterns without requiring any software to be deployed on instances. Amazon Inspector performs automated vulnerability assessments against EC2 instances and container images, identifying software vulnerabilities and unintended network exposure. It does not analyze behavioral logs for active threats. AWS Config tracks resource configuration history and evaluates configurations against compliance rules, but does not perform behavioral threat detection. Amazon Detective is a security investigation service that helps visualize and analyze the root cause of security findings after a threat has been identified. It works alongside Guard Duty, but does not perform the initial continuous detection. Okay, let's check question 18. Quick check. A compliance officer at Tailspin Toys needs to provide external auditors with AWS ISO 27001 certification reports and SOC 2 Type 2 reports to demonstrate that the underlying cloud infrastructure meets regulatory standards. Which AWS service should the compliance officer use to obtain these documents? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. External auditors need real reports. Artifact delivers them on demand. AWS Artifact is the self-service portal that provides on-demand access to AWS compliance documentation, including ISO certifications, SOC reports, PCI DSS attestations, and other third-party audit reports. These documents demonstrate AWS's compliance posture for the underlying infrastructure and can be downloaded and shared with auditors directly. AWS Security Hub aggregates and prioritizes security findings from multiple AWS services, but does not provide downloadable compliance audit reports. AWS Trusted Advisor provides operational recommendations covering cost, security, performance, and service limits, but does not supply audit documentation for external auditors. Amazon Inspector performs automated vulnerability assessments against EC2 instances and container images, identifying software vulnerabilities and unintended network exposure, not generating compliance certification documents. Here we go. Question 19. The setup controls the answer. Wide World Importers is building an automated customer support system that allows shoppers to ask product questions through a web chat interface. The system must understand customer intent expressed in natural language, maintain conversational context across multiple turns, and route customers to the appropriate department based on the topic of their inquiry. Which AWS service is designed for this use case? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Multi-turn conversation with intent routing, Lex is built for that. Amazon Lex is a fully managed service for building conversational interfaces using voice and text. It provides automatic speech recognition and natural language understanding capabilities, tracks session state across multiple conversational turns, and supports intent-based routing that can direct users to different workflows or departments based on the detected topic. Amazon Lex is the underlying technology that powers Amazon Alexa and is specifically designed for building chatbots and virtual assistants. Amazon Comprehend is a natural language processing service that performs sentiment analysis, entity extraction, key phrase detection, and topic modeling on existing bodies of text. It analyzes content but does not build interactive conversational flows or manage dialogue state. Amazon Polly converts written text into lifelike speech audio using deep learning, and is used for text-to-speech output, not for understanding or responding to user inquiries. Amazon Transcribe converts audio speech into text, and is used for transcription of recordings or live audio streams, It does not process intent or maintain conversational context. Next up, question 20. The condition is doing work. A cloud architect at Litware Manufacturing wants to reduce the environmental footprint of the company's AWS workloads. An audit reveals that several EC2 instances run at consistently low CPU utilization throughout the day, and non-production environments remain powered on overnight even when no development work is scheduled. Which sustainability pillar principle from the AWS well-architected framework directly addresses this situation? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. The sustainability pillar names this directly. Maximize utilization. The sustainability pillar's maximize utilization design principle states that organizations should avoid provisioning capacity that sits idle and instead consolidate underutilized workloads onto fewer resources, then scale to zero when inactive. Shutting down non-production environments overnight directly eliminates unnecessary resource consumption and reduces the workload's environmental impact. Purchasing reserved instances lowers the monetary cost of running instances, but does not eliminate idle compute time. The instances continue consuming energy around the clock regardless of utilization. Enabling multi-as deployment increases redundancy and availability, which may actually increase resource consumption rather than reduce it. Automating provisioning with CloudFormation improves operational consistency, but does not inherently reduce resource consumption or idle capacity. 3 takeaways from this session. First, CloudTrail captures API caller identity and source IP. Config only records configuration state changes. Second, fault tolerance guarantees zero downtime via full redundancy. High availability permits brief recovery periods. Third, S3 intelligent tiering automates tier transitions when future access patterns cannot be predicted in advance. These distinctions, who detects threats, who patches what, when fault tolerance beats high availability, define the CLF-C02 architecture mindset. Master them now and the scenario questions stop being hard. Keep going.